When Kyrie Irving was traded to the Dallas Mavericks on February 6th, they had a record of 29 and 26. After Kyrie's first game with the Mavericks, a win against the Clippers, they improved to 30 and 26, sitting tied for 4th place in the Western Conference. Optimism was high in Dallas. They paired an NBA top 75 player with another generational talent in Luka Doncic. This team just made the conference finals in 2022, and now they replaced Jalen Brunson with Kyrie Irving. Sure, they gutted most of their roster to do so, but who cares? This team's going to be really scary in the playoffs with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. But things went downhill pretty fast after Kyrie Irving's first game. They would not make the playoffs, they would not even make the play-in tournament, going as far as tanking their last 2 games of the season. So, what happened? Why did they not even make the playoffs? Let's talk about it. So, as I alluded to, on February 6th, the Dallas Mavericks traded Dorian Finney-Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie, an unprotected 2029 first-round pick, and 2027 and 2029 second-round picks for Kyrie Irving. And Markieff Morris, I guess. Kyrie Irving's a great player, a generational player who has mastered creating space for his shot and has an unbelievable finishing ability. But it's also impossible to ignore his volatility and the fact that he was in the final year of his contract. So I'm really hyping up Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic as players. So why couldn't they even make the playoffs? They missed a couple of games each after the All-Star break. Could that be the reason? Let's take a look at some numbers. Overall, the Mavericks went 9 and 18 after the trade. That's not very good. When Kyrie Irving played, they were 8 and 12. Not good either, but better than the Mavericks overall. When Luka played, they were an abysmal 5 and 14. But the most concerning statistic is their record in games played together. They were 5 and 11 when both of their stars played. Most notable to me were back-to-back games against the Charlotte Hornets. For the Mavericks, Luka and Kyrie were both playing, and for the Mavericks, LaMelo, Terry Rozier, and Kelly Oubre were all out of the lineup. The playoff hopeful Mavs lost back-to-back games to them. This was just 2 of 27 wins for the Hornets all season. By April 8th, at 38 and 42, their playoff hopes were hanging by a thread. They had to win out and hope for some help from the other teams. So with their season on the line against the Chicago Bulls, they sat Kyrie Irving and Christian Wood and only played Luka 13 minutes. They were giving up on the season despite still being alive for the play-in tournament and doing an embarrassingly obvious tank job in the process, in which they were fined $750,000 for. As you may know, as a result of the Kristaps Porzingis trade, the Dallas Mavericks would have owed the New York Knicks their pick if it fell outside the top 10. So, with those last 2 losses, they ensured they would maintain the 10th odds in the lottery. By the way, the change in public opinion about that trade over the last 5 years is absolutely wild and deserves a video in itself. But anyways, by April 9th, the Mavericks were eliminated from playoff contention. So, let's bring it back to that question. What went wrong? Let's start with everyone's main concern, their defense. Not only did they trade for an average at best defender in Kyrie, they also traded their best defensive wing, Dorian Finney-Smith. Everyone expected their defense to get worse, and it did. From the time of the trade to the end of the season, their defensive rating was 118.5, the 4th worst in the entire NBA. The 3 teams that were in front of them or behind them, however you want to say it, were the Rockets, the Blazers, and the Pacers, who were all actively tanking. Before the trade, the Mavericks were bad defensively, but not that bad. They had a defensive rating of 114.9, which was 22nd in the NBA. But let's dive deeper into those defensive numbers. Before the trade, the Mavericks allowed teams to shoot 66.8% from inside the restricted area, which was 16th in the league, so right about average. But after the trade, they were 4th worst in the league, allowing a 70.1% shooting percentage at the rim. So are the big men of the Mavericks the one to fault? The 3 bigs that played the most minutes, Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber, and Christian Wood, don't have positive defensive reputations at all. It's obvious the Mavericks are struggling with the lack of an intimidating big man. You may be thinking though, the Mavericks didn't trade any big man in that trade, so how'd they go from 22nd to 27th in defensive rating? Luka and Kyrie would often be guarding very capable guard scorers, and it's very hard to hide 2 subpar defenders. A guard would often drive past one of them, making the Mavericks scramble and have to rotate. The difference is, the Mavericks' wing defenders were much worse. Dorian Finney-Smith was obviously traded, and Reggie Bullock took a noticeable step back this season. Now since their wing defenders are beat, it's all up to the big men. Their trio of Wood, Powell, and Kleba are on the shorter side for centers, they're subpar defenders, and subpar shot blockers. And that's why teams shot so well at the rim. Their defense took such a step back because their defense would often break from all three levels, the guards, the wings, and the big men. Now let's talk about their offense. In 55 games before the Kyrie trade, they had the 8th best offensive rating in the league at 115.2. After the trade, they made a solid improvement to 117.2. This actually dropped them to 10th place in the NBA, because after the trade deadline, many teams commit to a tank, and so there's some inflated numbers that are put up near the end of the season. But long story short, they marginally improved on offense, but regressed much more heavily on defense. Not a recipe for success. Despite a lot of people not liking the trade though, most people saw the vision. Before the trade, the Mavericks were in the bottom 5 of assist percentage and pace, despite having a facilitating superstar in Luka Doncic. After the trade, they improved their assist percentage and improved their pace to about league average. But most importantly, they were able to diversify their offense. I noticed that the Mavericks ran a lot more screens with Kyrie and Luka as the ball handler, and off-ball screens for whichever one didn't have the ball. Luka had never really operated off the ball in his career, so having Kyrie as another lead guard always gave the Mavericks a real threat to have off the ball. Kyrie had experience in this role as well, with his time in Cleveland with LeBron. You would think that this more complex and diversified offense would help the Mavericks go on large scoring runs to put away games and be very, very good in the clutch. But most baffling, the Dallas Mavericks struggled in crunch time. In 27 games after the Kyrie trade, the Mavericks managed to play in 21 clutch games, which are games that were within 5 points within the last 5 minutes. And how do they perform in these games? 6 wins and 15 losses. And in those clutch minutes, they shot 40.6% from the field and under 28% from 3. Keep in mind, they were 20-14 in clutch games before the Kyrie trade, including an extremely memorable 9-point comeback in 30 seconds against my Knicks. And there's an obvious culprit for their lack of late-game success. Luka Doncic. I'm not kidding. I'm aware Luka Doncic is an amazing player, a generational talent, and has carried the Mavericks through the better part of 3 seasons. However, in his 14 clutch games since the trade, in which they went 3-11, Luka Doncic shot 32% from the field and 9% from three-point range. Was it all Luka Doncic's fault? Absolutely not. Were there other problems in clutch time? Absolutely. They still couldn't rebound, defend, or any of the other things I previously mentioned. This was expected to some degree. The struggle in clutch time was not, though. That was supposed to be their specialty. They added more spacing, offensive variability, and a known clutch shot creator to the team. So, with all that being said, what's next for the Dallas Mavericks? First of all, they need to re-sign Kyrie Irving. They cannot have a repeat of Jalen Brunson from the previous offseason, who's now taking New York to new heights. I understand Kyrie and Luka are not a match made in heaven, but you cannot lose him for nothing. They don't have many assets left, and they need to keep Luka happy by continuing to be competitive. Any sign and trade with Kyrie Irving would not give the Mavericks enough value in return, so re-signing him is absolutely necessary, despite his off-the-court shenanigans and his less-than-ideal fit with Luka. If the Mavericks give him a full max contract, I don't think he's going anywhere else. The Lakers are probably content with how their new team looks, and the Heat probably wouldn't want someone with Kyrie's attitude. They have their eyes set on Dame anyways. Maybe there's something with Atlanta if the Trae Young rumors are true, but I just think that's pretty unlikely. In free agency, I have some ideas for players they should target. After signing Kyrie, they should still be under the luxury tax and be able to use the non-taxpayer mid-level exception of $12.2 million. They also have access to the biannual exception of $4.45 million. These can be split between multiple players, so in essence they have $16.5 million to spend, despite the fact they'll be over the salary cap. They really need to target defensive talent on the perimeter, preferably 3-and-D guys, and a good rebounding big man too. To address the first concern, the Mavericks should take the risk on Dillon Brooks, if his AAV is less than $8 million. He got really clowned this previous season, especially in the postseason, but he was a good defender that scored 18 points per game in 2021 to 2022. If he's too expensive though, I would look at Jay Crowder, a steady 3-and-D guy, and sign him on a small 2-year deal. To address the second concern, I would first look at Mason Plumlee. He's a much more traditional center who had an underrated season for the Hornets and Clippers. He averaged 11 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists per game last season. You probably can't afford Plumlee and Brooks. If I had to choose one, I'd probably choose Plumlee, because I can see the vision of a lineup of like Kyrie, Luka, maybe Josh Green at the 3, Jay Crowder at the 4, and Mason Plumlee at the 5. Two guys that would be dream fits for the Mavericks are Bruce Brown and Brook Lopez, but I think that that's just a bit out of the Mavericks' price range. In order to fill out the rotation, I would look to sign guys like Seth Curry to be a really good shooter off the bench, Jeff Green and Kevin Love to be some forward veterans, or Javon Carter for some extra perimeter defense. Finally, I would re-sign Dwight Powell. You may think I don't like Powell because of my rant on the Dallas big men, but I think he's a fine player. I just think that with this team, he fits much better off the bench as a backup 4 or 5. I'd also let Christian Wood walk. He just doesn't really fit well with this team. But let me know what you guys think about all this. The Mavericks should be good next year, at least better than this year. But unless they pick up a gem out of nowhere, I really struggle to find a championship ceiling for this team. Like the video if you liked the video, and let me know in the comments of any other videos you want to see. Goodbye for now.